What was the most fucked up thing you saw in school? Our school bully. Nasty piece of work we'll call C. Ripped the wig off a new student. A. Who had recently returned from cancer treatment. They got into it and A was suspended despite multiple witnesses. We suspect even the teachers were slightly scared of C. Next day as we were leaving, A was waiting outside for the doors to open. Comes straight in, grabs C's hair, slams her head into a locker, then proceeds to pull out a huge pair of scissors and violently chops off as much hair as she can before the teachers intervene. She was obviously expelled, but man, she's still my hero. Bully C was definitely put in her place after that and absolutely toned down her torment of everyone else. Wish I knew what became of A. I worked at an American school in China a while back. One day, one of the school buses was on the way to campus from the city and there was an accident that students saw. A truck ran over a man riding his bicycle. The students on the bus witnessed the accident and watched as the man lay dying on the road. They were stuck in traffic and couldn't get away from the horrific scene for over 20 minutes. Kids were crying and traumatized. Most of them were elementary school students. There was a lot of grief counseling in the months after that. The boys in my class bred mold in one of the lockers. They managed to get milk so moldy. Some yellow fluid was all around it. A couple fucking in the dumpster behind the cafeteria. For the rest of the year, people would walk up behind the dude crinkling paper and asking if it was getting him hard. Some kid kept shitting in the sink every week and they had to keep cleaning it up. One day I walked in the bathroom and someone had put shit on the wall. In college, a guy dressed as Gandalf came into the classroom and said, "Thou shalt not pass," then left. It was right before finals. Saw assistant principal making out with a freshman in the hallway. Dude had to be like 55/60ths of a year old. This girl in my sophomore year sent nudes to an English teacher. When he rejected her advances, she reported him for possession of child pornography. He lost his job, his teaching license, and nearly faced jail time. He was a pretty chill dude too and was well liked by the student body. Goes without saying, the girl received a ton of death threats and ended up dropping out. I saw the PE teacher getting a heart attack during class and dying. It was fucking scary. Watched two girls get into a fight. One girl had a bunch of ear piercings and was wearing so many hoops it looked like chainmail. The other girl got her on the ground, grabbed those hoops and pulled hard. I will never forget the scream. The rings didn't give, but her ear sure as hell did. Blood everywhere. The girl standing over her like a goddamn psychopath holding a very recognizable ear in the air above her head. It was fucking Mortal Kombat in real life. There was a ginger vegan that would chew carrots up in his mouth and chase people around, spitting carrots at them. He ended up getting his head slammed into a bag hook in a fight afterwards. In first grade, a boy pulled his pants and underwear to below his knees and laid down on his back. Then a girl spat on him. I don't remember why, but I will never forget that sight. A kid jumped over the balcony to try and beat the rush on mashed potato day. He broke both his legs. Did not get his potatoes. A girl was coming back from a doctor's appointment and wasn't there to hear that we couldn't get out equipment for recess. She opened the door, grabbed something and went to leave. The wind kicked up and slammed the door on her hand and she lost a finger. They rushed her to the hospital and they sewed it back on and eventually it was back to normal, but that was the most fucked up thing I had seen. Didn't actually see it, but the most fucked up thing that happened in my school was the time a sophomore videoed a special needs kid jerking it off in the bathroom stall from above in the stall next to him. A girl had diarrhea and was wearing tights and sitting in class and the tights started getting really lumpy, but she didn't get up to go to the bathroom. Having a guy who killed his wife then come to the school and held my class hostage to try to force the school to give him his son so he could kill him. He was finally caught on his way to kill his parents. My school had this thing called intervention. It was like study hall. but only around 25 minutes long, and it was designed to help out kids who needed help finishing work. Though let's be honest, it was just a short study hall meant to fill up the school day. And it was always right after lunch. We had to wait outside the classrooms for the teachers to get back from their lunch breaks though. Sometimes they came quick before or right after we got there, but other times they came late. One time my teacher came 15 minutes late, and they never came at the same time. So it was awkward, being alone in the hallway while everyone else was in class. It was 8th grade, and a rather bad day for teachers. They were all late. We were all waiting outside the classrooms, and the hall was packed with 14-year-olds. Inevitably, a fight broke out between two kids. One of them was named Joe, and the other was named Luke, I think. I could be wrong on Luke. Joe was a huge prick who was in most of my classes, and Luke was a 7th grader that was also somewhat of a prick. There were punches and pushes thrown, but it was really had to hear it because of all the kids. In fact, I didn't even know what was going on until I heard a scream. In the hallway, there was a metal box on the wall that held the fire extinguisher. Joe had pushed Luke into it, and Luke hit the back on his head on the metal corner of it. Luke let out this blood-curdling scream, holding onto the back of his neck, crying and shouting. My head, everyone backed away from them, and there I saw Joe standing still, looking horrified, and Luke, on his knees with a trail of blood running down the back of his neck and ear. It was my first time seeing so much blood that wasn't my own or on the internet, and it really startled us all. A janitor saw it, and unlocked all the classroom doors with his keys, and ordered us to get into class, which we did, while he took Luke to the nurse. Our teachers eventually came, but they couldn't let class out. The reason being, blood had gotten on the carpet of the hall, and that was a health hazard. After around 45 minutes, the janitor was unable to get the blood out, so he just put a trash can over it and told nobody to move or touch it. The day went on as usual. Around a week later we found out that Luke had to get 5 stitches in the nape of his neck, and his parents chose to pull him out of our school. Joe was also suspended for the fight, but apparently Luke's parents threatened legal action, so that suspension turned into an explosion rather quickly. Rubber padding was put around the fire extinguisher box so it wouldn't happen again. And to this day I don't know if the blood ever got out of the carpet. TL. Dr. 2 boys fought in the hall and it ended with one of them needing stitches after bleeding heavily, and the other being expelled in front of the whole grade. Some girl broke up with a guy, so he smeared his shit on her locker and pissed all over it. Someone was suspected that they committed suicide in the school's parking lot. Not any of the students, neither staff. Just some random dude. In high school a guy punched a girl in the face, slammed her head into the wall, and threw her on the ground. He was big and mean enough that the adults just froze in their tracks. I didn't actually witness this, but I was at school for it. A friend of mine had a seizure in the swimming pool during PE. I was on the field when it happened and I saw a bunch of emergency personnel rush the scene. Turned out, it was the first time he was actually allowed to swim in PE. He had a medical history that deterred his family and peers from allowing him in the pool. But it turns out it was a fatal decision. I'm told there was some scuffle on the other end of the pool that distracted most of the students in the class and no one saw him sink below the surface until it was too late. While I didn't personally witness that scene, I am deeply, deeply concerned for those that did. Rest in peace, John. You are missed, loved and thought about every day. P.S. I still see that PE teacher every week at my job. She's the sweetest lady and I've never stopped feeling terrible for her. A girl with bulimia tried to shout down a spiral staircase, but because her gag reflex was so weak she vomited from a great height instead. Oh, the splash. A kid clipped the tip of his tongue off with a pair of safety scissors after someone dared him to. We entire school watched some guy jump from 12th floor. the entire science block nearly collapsing. The buildings in my secondary school were really old. They were built in the 50s and were only supposed to last 30 years at most. But they were still in use 60 years down the line because my school are cheapskates. Not to mention they didn't bother doing safety checks because who does that, am I right? Anyway, they got somebody in to put in new windows in the science block, and this bloke found out the entire science block was about to collapse, and if they hadn't brought him in, a lot of people could have died. They ended up fencing off the entire science block as well as about half the school, and put up scaffolding and columns to hold the ceiling up all over the rest of the school. All very distracting when I was trying to do my GCSEs. This wasn't the only thing that nearly fucked over my entire year group's GCSEs either. They ended up demolishing the entire building the year after I left too. Oh, and before I'd even started there were two separate incidents of arson destroying sizable parts of the building and the stripper incident. My school was a fucking tip, honestly. A female pupil punching and knocking out a male PE teacher. In high school, a fight that required ambulances and police. A guy student said something about a woman student and she proceeded to chase him out of the room. Caught him in the hallway, everyone followed, and she proceeded to pound him into the locker hard. In college, it was probably the girl who looked she was trying to suicide by car. Happy cake day. Second day of high school. A knife fight broke out about 20 feet away from me and my friends. When I was 8, we were making cookies in class and they gave us square cheese graters to make chocolate chips with, because they didn't trust us with knives. A fair judgment. Some kid was holding a few graters and pretended to be a robot. This girl speed at him because he wasn't a robot and proceeded to take one of the graters and grate his hand. Lots of blood happened and then a pair of twins both fainted. I went to school in Southern California. Our school had 2 rival gangs along with a dozen or so full-time bouncers with nightsticks. We had KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and a standard cafeteria to choose from for lunch. This day I decided to eat in the cafeteria. As I walk and I see a tall skinny black guy punch this Latino chick in the face. She stayed down for maybe a second, and got up a completely different person. Fueled by pure rage alone, she turned and focused all of her attention on the guy that hit her. He was still celebrating his short-lived victory when both of her feet left the floor and she flew at him. She punched his face repeatedly as he tried to block the repeated blows being rained down on him by this little ball of fire. Now keep in mind, she was a good 6 to 8 shorter than he was. In one seemingly fluid motion, she wrapped an arm around his head, planted both feet, and she straight up suplexed him, WWE style, into a table, and let him drop to the floor on the other side. By the time one of the guards made it in, the black dude had snuck away in shame and everything else was back to normal as though nothing had happened. I went to grab some pizza instead. The troubled kid had a panic attack because of a teacher. I think he had some issues at home. He was quiet, talked to no one. He always fought when people bothered him. He was something. Well, anyways, there was this teacher. She was really strict and got aggravated easily. Let's call her Mrs. Whale. We used to call her that, but she had asked him a question and he refused to answer. His head down looking at his empty paper. The teacher exploded on him, telling him stuff like, "You will never be anything in life, and do your parents even love you?" He sat next to me and I saw that he clenched his fists and started to shake. He tried to say something but it all came out to be gibberish because he broke down right there on his desk. No one really knew him, so we didn't know what to do. We all just sat there as the teacher kept on insulting him, not caring that he had started to shake. A nearby teacher heard all the commotion and came to check on us and saw it. She calmly talked to the still yelling Mrs. Whale outside as we just awkwardly sat there watching this kid break down. We did nothing. I really wish I would have done something, but I was frozen in place. After Mrs. Whale calmed down, the other teacher helped a kid out to the office. We never saw that kid and Mrs. Whale after that. They said Mrs. Whale had retired early, but I don't think so. Many years ago I sat next to a kid in high school who went on to kill his mom. He would always bring in photos of homemade bombs from 2-liter bottles, flamethrowers from squirt guns, etc. I thought it was the coolest thing and was so impressed by it until later on when I recognized I was encouraging a to-be murderer to keep being violent. Happy Cake Day. Some guys came in one day to show off some Viking armory, weapons and clothes. One of them went a little too far with the accuracy and his balls were on full display while he demonstrated stuff to us. We were all sitting down so we could all see it. We didn't say anything at the time, but we told the teachers later and they didn't give a shit. Really weird stuff. Not physically fucked up, but my principal tried to use the Parkland shooting to make our school look good. Our school's GSA has scheduled a walkout on the National Walkout Day. For the last period of the day, we had made posters, and there was even a script prepared for us to call law representatives. The Tampa Bay Times asked if they could come and take photos for an article on National Walkout Day. The principal said yes, in fear of us looking bad because the walkout was organized by a bunch of gay kids. Our principal scheduled his own walkout. We were all required to attend. It was in the courtyard, not even off campus, and we basically stood there while my principal talked about how great we were because we hadn't had a shooting. He told the reporter to come for that one. The leader of GSA told the reporter to come back for theirs, but the principal got mad at her. He said that if the reporter came back for the second one later in the day, he'd call the police on the guy for trespassing. Later, he accused all of the kids who'd gone to the actual walkout of being rowdy and tried to suspend us all. TLDR. My principal was an asshat about the Parkland shooting and kept us from getting any progress done.